Church 180. Right now, I just want to encourage you to like this service on Facebook or YouTube to let us know that you are there. Doesn't matter if it's in real time or later. Also, if you haven't liked or followed our Facebook page or subscribed to our YouTube channel, I want to invite you to do so. Hey, I just want to take this opportunity to invite you to our Waffles in the Park on March 14th at 11 a.m. Go ahead and watch our service online at 10 a.m. and then grab your family and friends and join us for the free lolly waffles in the park. These waffles are on a stick like lollipops with toppings like chicken and other things. So we want to see you there as we prepare for Easter together. Our Church 180 1UP page has all the links and everything you need to connect with Church 180. You can access that page via church180sd.com/whatup or by just opening the camera on your phone and holding it over the QR code that is on the bottom right portion of your screen. We exist and inspire hope because of the generosity of many of you tuning in this morning, and everything we're able to do to turn people towards hope in Jesus is because of your generosity. You could give online or set up a recurring financial gift at church180sd.com/give. It's on the What Up page, or mail a check to our P.O. box that is on our website. Hope you enjoy the service and have a great day.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise, and treasures of fame are never enough. When you came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing
was set up for ultimate success. You know, kind of one of those modern day trust fund babies. They just didn't exist back in the day. I mean, he'd inherited the world's greatest kingdom ever known to anyone of anywhere. I mean, he had riches, he had power, he had everything. And so it really was sort of a just don't mess this up scenario. But he still had that drive for more that's in many of us, probably including you, where it's just like, man, on the one hand, he inherited this kingdom that was like none other, but then on the other hand, it's like, man, I just would love to leave a bigger legacy and to advance this thing. And so he asked his buddies, he said, hey, what should I do? Because, I mean, the people that have kind of built this kingdom, they've worked hard. Like, what should I do? Should I advance this thing, leave my legacy, like let it take off, or should I give the people some rest and maintain and manage for a while before we set up? And his buddies were like, yeah, you should advance this thing. You should leave your legacy. You should make your mark. You should do your thing. But then he went to his, fathers, elders, some wise counsel that he had, and he said, what should I do? And they said, you should let these people have some rest. I mean, they've done so much and built this kingdom up to the place where it's at. You should give them some rest, and they'll be faithful to you, they'll be devoted to you, and ultimately you'll be able to still continue to build on your father's legacy and on this kingdom. And so he ended up choosing the former. And a few short days later, the kingdom divided in two, and he lost the best kingdom this world had ever experienced as it factioned off and split. You see, we're talking about the story of Rehoboam, and he's the fourth king of the ancient nation of Israel, and things could have gone so much different for him if he only would have listened to his father's advice. See, we're in Life as a Verb. Welcome to week 3 of Life as a Verb, where we are looking at the book of Proverbs and trying to gain wisdom in making decisions from the wisest person who's ever lived. God said that as he asked God for an understanding mind with which to govern his people. God gave Solomon wisdom like no one had ever experienced before, and he got to write 3 books of the Bible. Song of Solomon, which is a Hebrew sex manual. He got to write Ecclesiastes, which is one of my favorite books. And then he wrote this book called Proverbs, which we're looking at in this series for making better and wiser decisions. And Proverbs literally just means, like the way that we said it is this in this series, they're short statements about the way that life generally works. See, for me, there's more Proverbs than just in the book of Proverbs. For us in our culture, we have one that I thought about that I mentioned in week 1 the other day as I pulled into my townhome community and I saw an empty spot that was a little bit far away, but it was that time of day where all the spots are starting to be taken, and there was this spot right here, and I was like, man, I'd like to be a little bit closer, but a bird in the hand is worth more than 2 in the bush, because chances are if I go try to get a closer spot, I won't have one, and then somebody will have taken this one away by the time that I get back, so I just took this spot that was in front of me. See, that's a proverb, and today we're going to look at a handful of proverbs that if Rehoboam, this fourth king, if he could have just taken, like more literally, if he could have just listened to the advice of his father, he could have taken, his life could have taken a completely different shape. And chances are, here's the deal. If we're going to take some of these proverbs we're going to look at seriously today, your life could take a different shape. You could be a better husband. You could be a better parent. You could be a better son, daughter, wife, employee, boss, business leader. Heck, you could just be a better overall person if you take this seriously. And here's the deal. If you're not a Jesus follower, that's cool. What we're going to talk about today still applies to you. Most of it, almost all of it, still applies to you, and will make you better at life and make you a better person. But if you are a follower of Jesus, what we're going to talk about today can make you actually a better follower of Jesus. And have a better relationship with him. So we're going to start by looking at one main passage in Proverbs chapter 4, and then we're going to divvy up to a few other passages within the book. So Proverbs chapter 4, verse 1 says this: "Listen, my sons," this is Solomon talking to Rehoboam, one of his sons and his other sons. "Listen, my sons, to a father's instruction. Pay attention, gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching. For I, too, was a son to my father, still tender and cherished by my mother. Then he taught me, and he said to me," this is King David talking to King, his son Solomon, who became the king and Now Solomon's talking to Rehoboam, and he taught me, and he said to me, take hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my commands, and you will live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Remember, we talked about wisdom is personified as a lady within the book of Proverbs. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this, to get wisdom. And then he finishes the passage by saying this. He says, though it cost all that you have, get understanding. So verse 7, he says the beginning of wisdom is this, to get wisdom at all costs. Though it costs everything you have to get wisdom and understanding. He's saying, man, there's not much more important than making wise decisions. See, in the first week we talked about wisdom. It's just knowing the right thing to do and acting on it. It's knowing the right thing to do and making that decision. And he kind of ends this chapter 4. I mean, right here, it's like the punch in the guts, the Rehoboam story. He says, verse 20, my son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for their life to those who find them and health to one's body. And then he says this verse right here that I want you to memorize. He says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. You see, everything you do is going to flow from the desires of your heart. Even the stuff you don't want to do usually stems from a desire of the outcome that you do want. See, for Rehoboam, it was kind of like, man, I want to leave that legacy. I want to leave my mark. I want to advance this kingdom. And that was the desire of his heart, although it was corrupt, and it led him to ruin. Based on the decisions that he makes. So what I want to do is I want to, for the next few minutes, just look at a few short passages, looking at the wisdom that Rehoboam ignored, and what that means to us, and how, and how on a probably much smaller scale, you can avoid this as well. So we're going to look at Proverbs chapter 19, verse 20, first off, and 21, and it says this, listen to advice and accept discipline, and at the end you'll be counted among the wise. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. And so these next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about getting wisdom at all costs. And today, I want to kind of kick that off. Like we've talked about fearing God. We've talked about fearing God being the foundation for wisdom. We talked about trusting the Lord with all your heart, leaning not on your own understanding, but in all of your ways acknowledging Him, and He'll make your path straight. And what I want to do for the next 3 weeks is kind of lay out, specifically today, I want to lay out the 101 for what I call becoming wise. So the 101 for becoming wise. And so the first thing is this, and the 101 to becoming wise, accepting the way of discipline in your relationship with Jesus. Accepting the way of discipline in your relationship with Jesus. See, you go back to that, our chapter 19, verse 20, it says, listen to advice and accept discipline. And it's that idea of accepting the discipline that God has for us, but also accepting the discipline, almost like we talked about earlier this year with Warm Up 2021, and with the ruthless elimination of hurry, with the series that we call just being different, and it piggybacks off of a lot of what we talked about this year. So I want to just cover it briefly, but I put it this way. If you're following along with your note sheet that's on the weekend What Up, it's this: wisdom from Jesus is related to the price that we're willing to pay in the discipline to get it. Wisdom from Jesus is oftentimes related to the discipline that or the price we're willing to pay in discipline. And see, when I'm talking about discipline at Church 180, it's what we call spiritual disciplines in the form of prayer, in the form of Bible study and scripture reading, in the form of meditation, in the form of silence and solitude and fasting, and anything to help us to gain wisdom and to hear from God for our lives. It's why we promote these things so much. It's the life journal that you can get on the weekend What Up page right now. It's suggested a donation of $8 to cover the cost, but it's a plan with which to help you get into the Bible, study it for yourself, and get the wisdom of God. But it's also just prayer. See, James chapter 1 verse 5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. And seeing, to get to the second point that I want to talk about, I want to blow through that one because we talked about it so much this year. But to get to the second point, I want to look at 3 quick passages. There's a lot of them like it in the book of Proverbs, but there's 3 quick passages I want to look at. Chapter 11, verse 14 says, "For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors." Proverbs 12:15 says, "The way of a fool seems right to him, but the wise listen to advice." But the wise listen to advice. 15:22 says, "Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed." And there's so many more along those lines in the book of Proverbs. I just condensed it into 3 for you that are in your note sheet as well. But number 2 is this: just listening to wise counsel. It's listening to wise counsel. See, Rehoboam, he listened to his friends, and we all have friends, and that's cool, and we should, have conversations with our friends because that's fun and everything. And sometimes our friends can be wise, but sometimes they cannot. I mean, they're just in the thick of it usually, of life with us. And one day we're probably going to talk about how you're the sum of your 5 greatest friends, because it's just usually we start to look like each other, with our friends. And we'll get to that at some point. But we saw Rehoboam's friends led him to ruin. And your friends wouldn't do that. But my point is this, is that you need people in your life with which to turn to who are wise for their counsel. You need mentors, people who have gone before you and at least sort of know the route that you're trying to head down to help you out. And so I kind of had it this way. I'm sorry for the lack of water and a nice little illustration, but it was our first time recording all together with the band, and we did some Chick-fil-A before we got going, and so I have some Chick-fil-A sweet tea here. I don't know if you like this stuff. You can drop in the comments, whatever you think. But the thing is we need people to pour their lives into us. You see, when it comes to having a better relationship with God, there are people who've gone before us and have wise counsel to offer us. And when they do that, it's like they're pouring themselves, they're pouring their wisdom, pouring their life out into us. See, there are people in our lives that have gone the route before us, and they know how to be a good husband. They know how to be a good wife. They know how to be a good parent. They know how to do these parts. And whenever we go to them and we seek wisdom from them, we seek counsel, we seek advice, it's like they're pouring themselves out to us for that. We know there are people in our lives that can help us succeed at work, and people that can help us in those ways. There are people that can help us through some of the very critical junctures that you and I face in our lives these days, see? And when we come to those junctures, we can find people, we can see people in our lives who have been there before, and we can ask them and get counsel from them and wisdom from them, and it's like they're pouring themselves out to us in that time. See, for me, last week, you got to hear, if you tuned in for our week 2 of this series, you got to hear from a mentor of mine, Roger. And he had such a remarkable message last week. I'd love to invite you to go back and listen to it. But there was a critical juncture in my life that I can't share much about because of confidentiality surrounding a lot of it. But I thought that towards one of the points of our time in New Zealand in church planning, I was losing my mind to the point that I was having panic attacks, muscle spasms, lack of sleeping. And I was able to turn to Roger in that time, and he was able, through wise counsel, to get me through this critical juncture in my life as he poured himself out to me. And I listened and got wisdom and understanding from him in that. And see, nowadays I still got Roger in my corner for a lot of stuff we, face at Church 180. But I've got a whole host of other mentors and people who speak into my life and counsel me and help me in all kinds of various ways make wise decisions. See, I love how Solomon says, man, plans fail with the lack of many counselors, many advisors in our lives. And the third thing is this, it's just having people in your life that you pour into. Having people in your life that you pour into. I think of it as this way. Like I like coaching on the fly, and I've had the chance to train and equip and help out and prepare and a lot of different small group leaders within the church, Bible study leaders, and student ministry leaders. And one of the things that I've noticed is that oftentimes people don't learn until they've been, okay. I thought you were raising your hand like, oh crap. You know, edit that out, Jack. But oftentimes people don't learn a lot until they've been put in the game. And whenever, they get put in the game in this scenario or whatever, and then they're starting to pour their lives into other people, or whether it be those students or the people that they have at a Bible study or the people that they're just, leading or doing life with, that all of a sudden that they have questions and they have things that come into their life that they're having to figure out. And as a result of pouring themselves and pouring their life and, talking about marriage or talking about parenting, and I know, maybe it's like leading in student ministry or something like that, and it's like all of a sudden it's like now I'm starting to pour my life into somebody else, and as a result of me pouring my life into somebody else, I now have to follow some of that wisdom because they're looking and they're watching, and as a result of us pouring our lives into other people, we end up getting wiser along the way. So I wanted to talk about two groups of people that you probably should be pouring your life into. And you may not fit into the first camp, but you'll at least fit into the second camp. And the first camp is this: those that we raise. I don't know if you have kids, but there's a lot of kids around Church 180. So there's a lot of us that are in the throes of raising children. And Proverbs has so much to say about that. I'm just going to go to chapter 22, verse 6. And I love this passage. But chapter 22, verse 6 says this: start children off on the way that they should go, and even when they're old, they will not turn from it. And Solomon writes so much to parents. And he, verse 13, 24, 19, 18, 29, 17, it's on your note sheet. It's on your weekend What Up that you can look at yourself. And there's plenty more. But the first group of people that we pour our lives into is those that we raise. I love that Andy Stanley, one of my favorite pastors, teachers, preachers, whatever, he has this one quote that he says that's just so profound, where he says, the most important thing that you accomplish may not be something that you do, but somebody that you raise. And man, isn't that true? That's crazy. You see, I'm very appreciative to my parents for pushing me, in different periods of my life that I wanted nothing to do with God, nothing to do with the church, nothing to do with wisdom, only, infatuated with myself and narcissistic and chasing after whatever the heck I wanted to chase after. I'm so thankful to my parents for always pushing me back to wisdom and pushing me back to the people and the things of God, to the point where I even wanted to run away at times. I think I've shared the story. I will share the story at some point. But it was through my parents pushing me back to the people of God and the wisdom of God that God eventually got a hold of my life and pointed me back to Him. God used those people, used the prayers of those people and the presence of those people to move me back to Him. And sadly, being in youth ministry for more than a decade before Church 180, I've seen so many parents care more about their kids' popularity, care more about their kids' opportunities, care more about their kids' athletic achievements or grades or whatever than they do about their character, who they're becoming, their relationship with God, or their friends, which usually lead them towards roads that they don't even want them to go down. And see, what Solomon's saying is, man, start off your kids in the way that they should go, and they will return to it. And he says a lot of things about disciplining our kids, and we could go into that for a while, but he talks a lot about parenting as people that we pour our lives into and that we offer that wise counsel back to. So if you're a parent, you need people pouring into you, and in turn to be pouring back into the lives of your children through your example, through your testimony, through your discipline, and through your love and affirmation. So the first group of people we pour into is those we raise, and the second one is those that we lead. See, John Maxwell, I think, says it best about leadership. He said leadership is just influence, and there are people in your life and people in my life that we just influence and that we have influence over, and it's our responsibility to pour back into them and to, and to, when we can, to give counsel to them. See, there are people in our lives that need us to pour some of that wisdom that we've received from others back into them, people, people that haven't traveled the roads that you've traveled yet, haven't gone down the routes and haven't got to the stages of life that you've got to yet, that need to learn from your failures, your disappointments, and your success, and you pouring back into them along the way. See, I've met a lot of people in church world throughout my life who only like to be poured into from God and only like to be poured into from other people, but in turn don't pour back into anyone else. And I would say that, you just keep getting poured into and eventually you just make a mess, right? It's not biblical, or anything like that, but it's just, man, there's something about gaining wisdom from pouring into other people, part of our life and part of the wisdom that we've got from others. I think it's just the way that God created the world. But we're going to move into a time of communion, and ultimately communion is the ultimate pouring out. See, it's literally Jesus, after he's poured out his heart, his life, he's poured out, his example, his teaching, his testimony, all this wisdom that he's poured into so many different people. He eventually poured out his life, literally. And at Church 180, we take drink every single week to remember the blood of Jesus that was poured out, and we take food every week to remember the body of Jesus that was broken, so that we could, as we say at Church 180, turn toward hope because of the forgiveness that we experience and the life that we experience because of the sacrifice of Jesus. So we're going to take communion at this time, and I'm just going to pray for us as we lead into that. Jesus, thank you. Thank you that we get the wisdom from the ages, from the book of Proverbs, and we learn how important it is to listen to wise counsel and to pour into others wise counsel, Lord. But at this time, Lord, we just want to stop and remember and thank you for your blood that was poured out and your body that was broken so that we could stand before you and be made whole and to be made right, to be forgiven, and to have hope. So it's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord. will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones